Okay, thank you so much for joining us for our virtual hiking and nature talk with Aislinn Sarnacki. We are going full tilt with virtual programs at Rockland Public Library during these times, and we have been having great success with them, and we're glad that people are able to adapt and join us for these Zoom and Facebook Live programs. I want to extend a thanks to the Friends of the Rockland Public Library who always support our programming and do so many fantastic things throughout the year. And thanks to our director, Amy Levine, for making our Zoom account accessible to so many people. I would like to start off by telling you about a couple of upcoming programs that we have. Next Tuesday, June 9th, our Deputy Director, Patty King, and I will be presenting part 2 of the How Maine Are You Trivia Night series, and we hope you'll join us. You can request a link by emailing her at pking@rocklandmaine.gov. And 2 weeks from tonight, on June 18th, we will be welcoming Tom Atwell, sometimes known as the Maine Gardener. And Tom is a freelance reporter and gardening expert. He will be giving us a talk called Healing the Mind and Improving Property During Tough Times. Tonight, we welcome Aislinn Sarnacki. She is a reporter at the Bangor Daily News and the editor of Act Out, which is a section of the BDN that features stories, videos, and other content about a wide variety of outdoor activities, nature, and conservation. She produces a weekly column about hiking trails and other outdoor destinations throughout Maine. Additionally, Aislinn has authored 3 hiking guidebooks: Family-Friendly Hikes in Maine, Maine Hikes Off the Beaten Path, and Dog-Friendly Hikes in Maine. At the end of her talk, Aislinn will do a Q&A, so we would like to encourage you to, at that time, utilize the chat box feature. That will be the easiest way to get your question answered by Aislinn. If you're afraid that you will forget your question, feel free to type it in earlier. She may not get to it until the Q&A, but it will be there and we'll try to get to all the questions. If you have any difficulty with the chat box, you can use the raise hand feature during the Q&A, and I will try to monitor that to unmute you to ask the question, but the chat box would probably be the easiest. So without further rambling from me, it's my great privilege to introduce you to Aislinn Sarnacki for her wonderful presentation. Thank you, Aislinn.
Thank you. So this is awesome. Hi, guys. This is my first official Zoom presentation. I've been a guest on another presentation, but it's really neat to see all of you guys. I recognize some of you, and yeah, I think this will be a fun talk because I've actually been really busy recently. I am working from home, so this is my at-home office here. But I'm still working for the Bangor Daily News full time, and it's actually almost easier now working at home and being able to go outside whenever I want to, because I do write about outdoor recreation, wildlife, and conservation, and all of those things are still going on right now, even though we live in some crazy times. Actually, more people are getting outside and having time to get outside than ever because a lot of events are closed, have been canceled, a lot of things are closed, so they're turning to the outdoors to get outside. And I think that's awesome, and I hope that that creates a whole new group of hikers that we never had before, and people, you know, turning to nature more than they have, because I'm very passionate about that. I wanted to begin by introducing myself, telling you a little bit about myself. So I grew up in Winterport, Maine. I'm a lifelong Mainer, and I graduated from the University of Maine in 2010 and jumped right into my job at the Bangor Daily News. I was really lucky early on. I started as a copy desk editor, editing other people's stories, but that only lasted for about a summer, and then I got hired as a full-time, what they call a feature writer. And my job was essentially to just write stories. And I worked in all sorts of different topics, but I always wrote for the outdoors section, and then started writing for the outdoors section full time pretty early on. And I started my hiking column pretty early on. And the newspaper's changed a lot since I joined, even, it's only been 10 years, but way back when I started in 2010, we started transitioning from having it be all just looking at the print product to now we had this new online presence, this thing called the internet. And they started looking for reporters to start taking photos and taking video, and we were going to put everything on the internet. And that's how my column actually started, my hiking column. They're just looking for a reporter to create video, and looking at me, they assumed that I knew how to do video, and I did not dissuade them of that. I pretended like I knew how to do video, and that's how my column started. It's interesting, as a reporter, I always tell people it's not quite like in the movies where you go into a meeting and they give you the stories and then you go and you do the story. Usually reporters come up with their own stories. They have their own sources. They know their topic really well. And so it's up to them to come up with what they're going to write about. We get some help from getting press releases and things like that, but for the most part, we have to be creative and come up with what we're going to write about. And so when I was told I needed to create one video a week, I got a little bit nervous about that, because now I was going to have to come up with a topic every week to do a video of. And that was just one more thing on my plate. And so I decided to kind of work smart and not hard. And I decided that I would create a series that was hiking. And then I would just go to a new trail every week. And I really didn't know what I was getting myself into at the time. I was an avid hiker of big mountains, but I didn't realize just how many trails there were in the state. And I started to really love nature and going on easy hikes as well. I can spend just as much time on a 1 mile easy trail as I can hiking a big mountain. So because I get so distracted by nature and taking photos and video. And so, yeah, like 8 or 9 years later now, I've hiked over 300 different trails throughout the state and created videos and documented them all in words and photos. And it's been quite a cool job. I did want to do a little show and tell early on. This is the camera I use. It's a Canon. It's nothing too special. This crazy thing at the top that looks like a squirrel tail is actually my my microphone. That was something I improved on after a few years, realizing that the wind made my videos kind of, oh, here comes Oreo, my dog. Yeah, okay, hi. And Oreo is a major star in my videos as well. You might come back to say hello. I'll show you him if he comes back. Eventually, I was asked by Down East to write a couple hiking guides, and I was really excited because it's always cool to have your work in different forms. And I actually did do a ton of extra work to do these hiking guides. I revisited every trail and rewrote everything, so it's not just regurgitating my column. So my first hiking guide was Family Friendly Hikes in Maine, and it has 35 hikes from throughout the state. And then the next one is Maine Hikes Off the Beaten Path, which came out 2 years ago. And same thing, 35 hikes. And I just got to choose what I thought was off the beaten path and lesser known. And then last year, Dog Friendly Hikes in Maine came out. And it's the same idea, except for Oreo liked that one a lot more because I went to trails I thought he would like. So I thought today, after talking about my job and stuff, that I would just talk about hiking during this time, because a lot of what I've been writing about recently has been how to get outside right now safely and honestly avoid the crowds, because a lot of people are getting outside, which is fantastic, but sometimes it's hard to know where to go. You're not going to run into overcrowded areas. So first of all, I will screen share real quick. Let's see. All right. Let's see. All right, so is everybody seeing my screen? Do a thumbs up.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Great. All right, so first of all, for those of you who are wondering what Oreo looked like, this is Oreo here, obviously on the left, and then my husband and I on the right. I think we were hiking Double Top there in Baxter State Park. So while I love nature and easy hikes, I also love the big mountains as well. Okay, so I just wanted to go over real quick some of my tips for hiking during COVID-19. So the trailheads are going to be more crowded than normal. There's more people getting out for sure. And people, a lot of people are working from home like me. So there's still like a weekend thing going on where people are at the trails a little bit more during the weekend. So if you go during the weekday, it might not be as crowded. Also, there's this phenomena where most people visit hiking trails in the late morning to like noonish is when they're arriving. So if you go early, like say you go 7 or even 8 o'clock, you might have more luck parking. Or if you go for like a late afternoon hike, that might be a good idea. But bring a headlamp if you do that, because you don't want to get out and then be out there in the dark. I've noticed that if you visit during not ideal weather, it's actually really good. A couple days ago, no, was it yesterday? Yesterday, yeah. When it was kind of gloomy out, I went out and went on a hike, and I was the only person at the trailhead. And it was just kind of like overcast. So people definitely get out when it's sunny. So maybe, I don't know. I mean, don't avoid the sun, but if you really want to go somewhere popular, maybe go after it rains or something like that. I do suggest bringing a mask for crowded parking lots. I think it's just respectful of other people. I know it's a kind of a politically fueled thing right now, but I do not wear a mask when I'm hiking. I do think the fresh air is good for you, but if you're, you know, in close proximity with other people, I think it's respectful. And also bringing hand sanitizer along is just kind of a nice thing for peace of mind. I did hear it was a problem. They were thinking that it was a problem when people were going up to kiosks and touching the trail maps, and like it's just like people are so predictable. I've noticed, and I'm predictable, and people like touch the same things. So hand sanitizer is a good thing to have with you if you're worried about that. Also, right now a lot of restrooms are closed at trailheads, so prepare to go to the bathroom in the woods and do it the right way. And you can look up how to do that, but creating a cat hole far away from the trail, that sort of thing. And I was thinking about doing a whole story on how to do that. I'm just trying to think of how to gracefully talk about going to the bathroom in the woods in a family newspaper. So we'll see about that. And, you know, I think right now also to try to do hikes that are maybe a little bit under your skill level, maybe a little bit easier, or places that you know really well. Just because I know there is a concern among the rescue community that they're going to have to go rescue people, especially with more people on the trails right now that haven't hiked before. And I just, yeah, once you're trying to rescue someone, it's really hard to keep that social distance, and it puts a strain on, you know, the medical field. So also have more than ever now, have a plan A, B, and C. So if you have a trail that you really want to go to, have that be your plan A, but then if that's a really popular trail, it might be if the parking lot's overflowing, then you don't want to go there. Then you have a trail nearby. Even if it's 30 minutes away, it's still, you know, you can have a plan B and C. I know it's tough in some areas of Maine, but that's what I've been doing recently, because I honestly don't want to go places that are crowded. I'm a little bit more careful because with my column, I don't want to send the wrong message, but so I have to be super careful about safety stuff. And yeah, if the parking lot's full, go to another destination. I know that I recently talked to some trail maintainers, and it's not just about avoiding crowds, it's also about protecting the resource. So, you know, while you might not be worried about running into other people, you think you can get by them safely. If you start parking on the side of the road, that could be a safety hazard, but also if just too many people are on the trail at once, you could start running into things, and trampling down like delicate plants, that sort of thing, causing erosion. So now I want to talk a little bit about, I'm going to focus on Midcoast area hikes because that is where the library is. There's a lot of them. It's amazing how many trails Maine has. I mean, I've been at this for a very long time and going to a different trail every week, and I still not hitting them all. But Midcoast tends to be pretty close to me, so I have hiked quite a bit in that region. Bald Rock Mountain here on the slide, this is a great example of a popular trail, a popular hike. It's absolutely beautiful. It's in Camden Hills, but you're going to want to try to maybe pursue this trail on a weekday or with less than ideal weather, unfortunately, right now, because I do think it will be absolutely slammed. The cool thing is there's a lot of other hikes in the area, so you can have plan B, C, D, whatever. There's a couple trails that I think people don't think of as much to go hiking at, and that's like places like Mary Spring Nature Center in Camden. This place is a pretty extensive trail network, and right now it'd actually be really beautiful because of they have these flower gardens there that are stunning and attract all these butterflies and different things. So if you're into nature, I would definitely check out a place like that that's kind of out of the way a little bit. Of course, you have Camden Hill State Park. You have Batty and Mount McGuntacook. But if you go up to the other side of the park, the less popular side, you have mountains like Cameron Mountain, Frohawk Mountain. You just have all the different trails out there. So that's another option, is just to if you show up and the parking lot's full, maybe go to the other side of the park. I think it's just going to take a little bit of extra planning on, and having a trail map with you is really the way to go about it. So this is, I hike year round. So that's another thing. When I started my column, I was a summertime hiker, and I started my column in November of 2011 or 12 without really thinking. And so then I instantly had to become a winter hiker. So I had to get all the gear and learn to love the winter a little bit more. And I hike year round. And so Cameron Mountain, I actually did snowshoeing, and it was a freezing day, but it was really beautiful. And that's an interesting one because it's not very high. It's in Camden Hill State Park. It's not very high, but because the top is covered with blueberry, I think they're blueberry bushes. They're really low-lying plants. There's a great view from the top. So you don't have to put in a lot of effort, and then you get a great view, which is nice. Down your way, Owl's Head State Park and beautiful things like that. And the one thing about coastal parks right now is they are getting pretty crowded. So again, trying to go kind of an off time is the way to do it. Beach Hill Preserve, I would say this one's probably getting more popular. When I went way back in the day, it wasn't really that well known, but I think it's becoming increasingly well known. But it's an absolutely beautiful hike with this beautiful stone hut at the top that has all this history. It's not really a hut, it's like a interesting house thing. Has all this history and a lot of cool plants. It's got a huge bird list that, there's a ton of different birds out in the meadow and stuff. And you climb up this gradual hill to get to it. There's also some woodland trails as well. So it's a beautiful, beautiful hike. So the path I have explored bit by bit is 50 miles of interconnecting trails. And sometimes you might have been hiking on it and you didn't even realize you were on it. Ragged Mountain is on it, which is a super popular hike in the Camden area. But then across the road, Spruce Mountain is on it, and that's not as well known. Pleasant Mountain's on it, Hogback Mountain's on it. And then there's low-lying trails like the Canal Path, which is absolutely beautiful. There's a lot of different paths on the Georges Highland Path, and that's a great thing to explore. And that's the Georges River Land Trust. If you check out their website, you can hike the whole thing bit by bit. It's pretty cool. And And then, you know, there's just a ton of other trails. It's kind of hard to get to them all in the Midcoast area. There's the Hills to Sea Trail, obviously, in Belfast to Unity. That's 47 miles long and it's a lot like the Georges Highland Path. It goes through all these different properties. My dog Ori is barking right now. And let's see. So in general, I didn't want to, you know, take up all the time by talking about all sorts of different trails because there's just so many. But to help you find trails, especially trails that are maybe lesser known right now, they don't have as many people on them. I like to give some tips on that. So different landowners, the reason trails are so hard to find in Maine sometimes is because different landowners own and maintain different trails. And so they all have different websites, they all have different books and guides and resources. And so it can be really tough. So the way I find trails, so I go to the Maine Bureau of Parks and Lands to check out state parks, public lands, historic sites, all that stuff. I go to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, has some properties in Maine, limited. There's more than 80 land trusts in Maine, so that they all have trails pretty much. The Maine Audubon has trails, the Nature Conservancy, Appalachian Mountain Club. Then there are these obscure, like just random organizations that you would never think had trails in Maine. And like the New England Wildflower Society has property and trails in Maine, which I just stumbled across one day. This is actually, this stone fireplace is from Annie Sturgis, I think it's Wildlife Sanctuary, which is maintained by the New England Wildflower Society and it's awesome for actually hike for this time of year because it has all sorts of different spring forest flowers. And yeah, I actually ended up hiking it in the spring. So it was kind of just lucky that I did that. So hiking guidebooks, obviously I have mine up in the front, but another great hiking guidebook is the Maine Mountain Guide, which is kind of like when I got into hiking, people were like, you need to get this book. And then Falcon Guides puts out a ton. So there's like hiking waterfalls, and Greg Westrich, he's a Maine author. He's done a number of hiking guides as well. The Maine Appalachian Trail Club, if you want to check out the Appalachian Trail in Maine, has a wonderful guide and book and map that goes with it. And then there's online resources. So I did want to mention my section of the Bangor Daily News is bangordailynews.com/actout. And on that section, I maintain this Google map. And so all I have to do is scroll down a teeny bit and there's the Act Out map. And that has all these little hikers, and you can click on each hiker and the hiker it pops up and it tells you how hard the hike is and all sorts of other information. And then it gives you a link, and it will link you over to a video and a like detailed description of the hike and driving directions. So that's kind of my little version of MaineTrailFinder.com. So that's another great resource, Maine Trail Finder. I honestly use it a lot to find trails. They do not have videos, but they do have descriptions of hikes and trail maps, and super helpful. Then there's the Maine Land Trust Network. So if you don't know what land trust you are looking for, you can check that out. And they actually list land trusts by county. So you can just pop in your county and you'll see. Yeah, and then there's the Maine State website, obviously. I use that a lot. All right, let me quit sharing my screen for a second. Oh, I stop share. That's what I do. Okay, cool. I think I did it right. Okay, I'm back. So I did want to say, let's see, that, let's see, let me get back to my thing. Okay, so I did want to kind of explain my job and like take a break for a second. So my job's interesting. People often ask me if what I do is like just kind of a side thing or like for fun, or if it's my full-time job. And it is my full-time job. So as now the Act Out editor. So what I do is I write stories. I usually write 5 stories a week on outdoor recreation, wildlife, etc. So that keeps me pretty busy. I also take photos and video with some of those stories. And now I also edit people's stories to go into my section, and I try to get more voices to be in the Act Out section. It's kind of a play on words for active outdoors. And so if you guys know anybody that wants to write about something outdoorsy and get their stuff out there, definitely shoot me an email, reach out to me, because I'm always looking to get more voices. And I've actually had quite a few Maine Master naturalists that go through that program in Maine, which is an awesome program. A number of them have written for the Act Out section, and I just love having different voices and perspectives in that section. Also, let's see, I do occasional events like this and presentations and things like that. And it's been interesting. With my column, I've transitioned from just doing hiking to also pursuing skiing. Obviously, I've always done snowshoeing. I did ski biking this year. I've done some paddle boarding. I'm getting a lot more into doing paddling, especially right now where the trails are getting crowded. So I'm going to be doing more kayaking, canoeing, that sort of thing. And pretty much the only thing my section doesn't cover is hunting and fishing. And that's not for any personal reasons. That's just because John Holyoke at the Bangor Daily News writes about hunting and fishing, and he's the outdoor section. So I don't want to step on his toes. So, and our sections do overlap a lot. So that's kind of fun. And we both write about wildlife. So both the Act Out and the outdoor section kind of go together, and we're like buddies or something. Yeah. So let's see. I did want to kind of end my presentation by talking a little bit about wildlife and nature photography and that sort of thing. So over the years, as I've spent more and more time outside, I've learned a lot more about the wilderness, mostly from other people. Honestly, I do a lot of stories where I'll go out with naturalists or people who like to forage for mushrooms, or wildlife photographers, or biologists. And so throughout doing that, throughout all of Maine, I've really had the opportunity to learn a lot about Maine nature and wildlife. And I think the more that you're out there in general too, you kind of just learn firsthand. Like I was never into birding before. I kind of thought that was I don't know. I thought that would be a boring thing to do, to be honest. And now I'm obsessed with it. I love birding. And I still don't know how to bird by ear, which drives me crazy, because I'll be out hiking and I'll stop and be listening to all these different birds and realize I don't know what any of them are. But I do know a lot of birds by sight now, which is pretty fun. And I'm learning the sounds, which I should also mention. We have a birding columnist in Act Out. His name's Bob Duchesne. I stole him from the outdoors section, actually, because I loved his column so much. And he'll be like, if you ever were curious about a bird, just take your phone and record it, and I'll tell you what it is. And I've actually sent him a number of photos, and he's told me the bird species before. But so if you're interested in birding, you should check out his column. It's called Good Birding, and he's hilarious too. Even if you're not into birding, his column is so funny, and just the way he writes about birds and his dry sense of humor is really good. But anyway, I've gotten really into wildlife, and I've gotten to do some really cool things with my job, fortunately, because I get to shadow people like biologists. I've gotten to go out on a couple of puffin islands, and I actually got to hold a puffin because they were doing this thing that they call, they're like, I showed up on the island, I think it was sometime in June or July, and I was writing about how puffins were having problems eating certain fish, and their population was declining a little bit. And when I showed up, they're like, "It's Christmas today." And I was like, "Really? What are you talking about?" And they're like, "It's the one day out of the season where we go into puffin burrows and we take out the chicks and we weigh them and make sure they're healthy and all that stuff. And then we put them back in and we record all the scientific data. And it's the only time we touch any of the birds all season. And they also have these boxes where if a puffin perches on it, it like the lid flips and it goes into the box. And then they go and they check out the adult puffins. So I got to go around with the biologist and they actually got a puffin in a box and she was holding it, taking all the data. And then she like looked at me and she's like, this is probably gonna be the only opportunity in your life to hold a puffin. So you can go ahead and like hold it. And she showed me how to like hold it perfectly. They're actually smaller than I thought they were. So I have a picture like that. I've had the opportunity to go to a lot of like animal releases after they've been rehabilitated or relocated. So I get to get up and close and personal with a snowy owl. I got to watch little bald little eaglets get rescued from up in their nest because their parents had both gotten injured. Gotten to visit a bear den in the middle of winter. So it's been a lot of fun. And so there's definitely perks of the job. But also there's a lot of just like sitting at home and writing like all day. And also my videos, I edit my videos and photos and that takes forever. So there's a lot of office stuff going on as well behind the scenes. Yeah, so I figured I would kind of wrap up the presentation by going through quite a few different animal photos that I liked over the years, because who doesn't like to see really cute animals? Let's see, share screen. Cool, all right. Nope, that's not right. So this, obviously this is a loon, and I got this photo when I was out hiking on my birthday a few years ago, and it was like this cool little birthday present. And usually you don't get that close to loons because you really shouldn't. Just like social distancing with wildlife, it's a thing. But I was walking along the side of Jordan Pond on that path in Acadia National Park that's right by the pond, and it popped up like right beside me. So it was the loon's choice, and I got this really cool photo. This photo is funny. I went for a hike. I think it was also out in the Acadia area, and I actually hadn't seen any wildlife the entire hike. And then I was driving out of the trailhead parking area, and this deer just like was staring at me. And so I took this photo hanging out of my car window, but we've used it in so many stories that it makes me laugh because every time we write about a deer, they're like, we need a deer photo. And we use this one. This I actually took on one of the puffin trips of these two seals, little baby seal. And I've written also about seal rescue. It's weird, like I know all these weird things now. It's funny because journalists aren't really, they can't be experts in everything, and we're certainly not experts in everything we write about, so we learn like a little bit about everything. And so it makes for interesting dinner conversations sometimes, because I can tell you all about seal rescue, how it works, and all that. I went on a moose safari, which anybody can do. I don't know if they're open right now because of COVID, but this was out in Greenville, and we saw 6 moose. Basically, they take you out on a canoe, and weird thing that I learned on the moose safari is moose have terrible eyesight, like absolutely terrible eyesight. And so we were floating in a canoe really, really close to it. I mean, it got to the point where my 400mm lens was, I couldn't take a photo anymore because it was so close, and it was taking up too much of the frame. It wouldn't focus. But this is a cow or female moose. She's eating plants, which is what they do, aquatic plants. And you could hear her breathing. She was so close. And then a juvenile moose, a young male, came up nearby and wanted to also eat where she was eating, and she was having none of it. So she was staring at him and snorting at him and stuff. And he eventually took the message. There was a hierarchy there for sure. But I guess they can smell really well though. And and they can hear, well and stuff. So we had to stay super quiet. And our guide actually took a certain water plant and was like crumbling it up so that hopefully that scent was being carried towards the moose and not our scent, which is kind of cool. So that was a really neat experience. And actually when they took us out there, they went on all these back roads in the Moosehead region, and they wanted to make sure we didn't know where we were going. So they were like really confusing us. And I'm like, what pond is this? They're like, it's a mud pond. And I'm like, because there's like, hundreds of mud ponds in Maine. They didn't want me to reveal the location, but they always see moose there. So it was really neat. It was really cool. This was a really awesome. So these are actually baby blue herons in a heron rookery is what they call it. So when a bunch of nests they all nest in the same area. I don't know if it's like a strength in numbers type of thing. And it's called a rookery. And I went out there because there's a blue heron count in Maine where volunteers, and the same thing with loons as well, volunteers go out and they count the numbers, and it's like what they call a citizen science project, so that biologists will have all this data that they couldn't gather on their own otherwise. And so I went out with a volunteer loon counter. Her name is Gail Smith, and she's also a wildlife photographer, a really great one. And we went out in her four-wheeler for quite a ride, and a buggy ride. And we got out to this bog and stood with waders in the bog with our cameras and took photos while she counted them. So it was a really rare experience because typically you're supposed to stay away from rookeries. You're supposed to leave them alone so that they, nest in peace. And you'll notice on a lot of conserved lands, if there's a heron rookery there, they'll close the trail that goes anywhere near it. So it was another one of those awesome experiences that I was fortunate enough to have. This is just a cool photo I wanted to share. Sometimes when I'm paddling, I get the coolest photos because, and that's why I started to really love paddling, even though it's a little bit nerve-wracking to have your big, expensive camera in your kayak with you. I do have a dry bag, but yeah, it can be, I'm going to drop it in the water someday. So just wait for that. But I see a lot when I'm out paddling, a lot of birds. And then this was just cool. I think there's like 10 turtles on this log sunning. And these turtles actually, they're wicked shy. So if you get close to them, they'll all go into the water. And yeah, I've seen this a number of times actually. So this isn't that rare of a sight if you go paddling. Just, I don't know, turtles like to hang out together. One of my favorite places, if you get up to the Bangor area, one of my favorite places to go wildlife watching is Essex. They call it Essex Woods, but there's a bog there. It's actually right by the Bangor Mall. It's you get to it by going across Buffalo Wild Wings or Hobby Lobby. It's the road across from that. And there's a nice trail and it goes around this bog, which is kind of unusual to have a trail go around a nice big bog. And there's tons of different animals. And I guarantee you there are baby ducks there right now. I can't even count the number of different types of birds I've seen there, from egrets to soras there's just so many. And it's right near downtown Bangor. So you really don't have to go far to see all sorts of cool stuff. I see some kiddos and it's so cute. And also sometimes you don't have to have great, camera equipment or skill to get like this really cool photo that makes you feel all the feels. So this was super early in my photography. I don't know if you call it a career, but I didn't have a lot of great equipment. I think I had like a 300 millimeter lens and a Rebel camera, which was, wasn't that great. It was okay. And these bears were actually pretty far away, but I still love this photo, and it's a little blurry. It's not super detailed, but it's got baby bear looking at the mom. Super cute. Yeah. I also really love, I love all sorts of wildlife. And this is a snapping turtle that I took. I don't know, like One thing, I have helped so many snapping turtles cross the road. I don't know if you're that type of person who likes to do that, but and I also wrote a whole story about how to help snapping turtles cross the road because they're different than other turtles. They'll bite you and they can jump, and their neck can come out and reach around like halfway around their bodies. So you have to be really careful because if you pick up their shell partway, halfway down the body, they can actually reach back and bite you. They can also dig with their claws. I have a guest here. There's Oreo. And he's decided to come in and chew on his bone in the middle of my presentation. So hold on a second. All right. You can't chew on your bone right now. Go on. Can you distract Oreo? All right. He does that all the time to me. He's put all of his bones in this office, and he comes in and chews on them. But he can be very loud. So that was my typical hiking buddy there. Yeah, so I've saved a lot of turtles crossing the road. But also a really important thing to know about turtles is if they're crossing the road and you go and you try to get them off the road, bring them to the side they're headed because they know where they're going. And if you bring them to the wrong side of the road, and I've done this before, they will turn right back around and hike up. And what are you doing? He's back. Go away. All right. My husband isn't helping me at all. And then we'll go right back across the road. So that's happened to me before. This is just a pretty bird. Oh, I did want to mention, so this reminds me that, moving south from where you are, the Phippsburg area, or kind of the Bath area down towards the coast, and also down to the Harpswell area. Go away. God. Yeah, my husband gave him a treat and he decided to come in and eat the treat behind me. But yeah, so the Phippsburg area and also the Harpswell area, they all have a bunch of great trails. So the Harpswell Heritage Trust actually has a hiking challenge where you hike a bunch of their trails. And then also, if you want to check out the Booth Bay Botanical Garden, I don't know if they're open right now because of COVID. I haven't checked, but they have a vast trail network. Like I couldn't even do it in one day. So there's a lot of great trails down that way as well. Oh, well, this one's pretty cute. So these are just some cute birds that I took. I think I was at the Audubon Center. And I just wanted to end with my favorite photo ever. This little baby deer I took while I was out camping and paddling and hiking out in the Moosehead area. And we were actually up at Sabumic Camps, which is like way north in Moosehead Lake. Are you done? Yeah. And yeah, so this guy was roaming around and he was crying and it seemed like he was looking for his mom, but actually because I've written about baby deer before, I knew that the mom was around and just foraging and it wasn't a problem. So I did want to remind you guys, like if you're out hiking and spending time outside right now, for the most part, if you find baby animals, baby wildlife, there's this like thing that the DIFW says, the Department of Inland Fishery and Wildlife, and that's if you care, leave them there. And that's especially true for fawns. Fawns will actually curl up and lay down in the grass for up to 48 hours with the mom gone. The mom has to forage and feed itself, and then she'll come back and she knows exactly where the baby is. And sometimes the baby will make noises and beg for her to come back, but the baby's perfectly fine. And if you're super worried about wildlife, like if you see a baby and it's been there for a little while, just monitor it and, check and make sure that the mom does come back. But for the most part, just leave it there. Yeah. So I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions if you guys have them. I don't want to just talk your ear off if you have questions. Another thing that I don't know if it's an expert in, but I write a lot about ticks. And so if you have questions about that, I know most people usually do. Or if you just have questions about, hiking during this time, if there's a good trail in your area, that sort of thing, I am all ears. And I think we're supposed to be using the chat function to ask questions.
So Aislinn, can you see the chat box, or would you like me to tell you the questions as they come in?
Go ahead and read them out.
Okay, so we have to start with a question. Could you share your email address so we can write to you with questions?
Yes. Okay, so my email address is ASarnacki, so it's A Sarnacki. So my first initial, last name, at BangorDailyNews.com, all spelled out. And that should be, I think it's at the end of it should be always at the end of my columns now, because I didn't used to always do that, and now I'm really starting to always put my email at the end. Another thing that I wanted to share is I do have a Facebook page that I interact with people on there. They can message me on there, and I post all of my stuff on there, so that kind of lets you know what's going on. I always try to post every single story on there. And I have a Twitter. So the Facebook is One Min Hike Girl, but you can also just type in Act Out with Aislinn, and you can get the Facebook page. And then the Twitter is One Min Hike Girl, so One Min Hike Girl. And then, I have an Instagram. It's at Act Outdoors. So, and that I just started a few months ago, and I actually am more active on that than I am some other things. I really enjoy just posting random photos on that and telling little stories on the side. So, and I might be doing some live things on that if I ever find the time. So, yeah.
There is a question, can you please share tick recommendations?
Sure. I'm guessing it's protect yourself tick recommendations. Yeah, so that's definitely a problem. The good news is a lot of hiking trails, fortunately, are maintained. So it's safer, I think, to go hiking and walk on a trail than it is to garden or go hunting, because you're not bushwhacking and stuff typically when you're hiking. So you're not traveling through things like tall grass and shrubs and things like that. Ticks, just knowing tick habitat, I think, is really big. So ticks tend to like tall grass. They like shrubbery and stuff, and that's because they do a thing called questing, where they climb to the tip of blades of grass or the tip of leaves, and they reach out their front arms and they wait for something to come by and then they grab it. So kind of creepy, but that's what they do. And they also really like to have tall grass and things like that, because they need something to hide underneath if it gets really hot or dry. Ticks, number one, well, deer ticks, and that's what we're worrying about most in Maine, their number one nemesis is being dry. They dry out really easily. So another tip that I have is go out on a hot sunny day. You're gonna run into ticks less. Also, again, with the heat, when you come inside, not only wash your clothes, but dry them on high heat, because ticks can last in water pretty well. They can live through a dryer tumble, but they can live through a washer tumble, but not the dryer. So also, people ask about what type of chemical protection. So I have heard, and I know that permethrin works really well. I know a lot of people are against chemicals, but permethrin you can use to treat your clothing, not your skin. And there's a specific way to do it. You follow the instructions. You have to wait a while for it to dry. There's also clothing that is made by different companies that already has permethrin in it, and it's been through a special process that makes it stay on the clothing longer and be a little bit you can wash your clothing more with it staying effective. So that's really good. So there's insect shield and stuff like that. So you can look up clothing. that's all great. Also, just wearing a lot of clothing. I used to always love wearing shorts. I still do like to wear shorts when I hike, but more and more I've been wearing pants and being a geek and tucking my pants into my socks, because that really helps. If they're going to crawl up your leg, it's better that it's your pant leg and you can see them and flick them off than your skin. You know, and same thing, wearing long sleeves. And that honestly helps with like mosquitoes and black flies as well. If you can wear more clothing, even if it's light, airy clothing, and cover up your skin when you're out there. Also, it just helps when you're walking through underbrush and there's like scratchy plants. So wearing pants, and I wear pants that are like zip off pants sometimes, so that I can, if it gets super hot, you can just zip off the bottoms. Also probably geeky, but and I've also heard that DEET, like certain bug repellents, usually the most harsh chemicals, can help repel plant ticks. So DEET, and there's a couple of other ones I've written about that will help. You know, and honestly, knowing where ticks are worse, it's right now in Maine, it's along the coast and in the south, but it's all creeping in and up. And so, you know, they're really bad in Bangor. They're getting worse and worse. And, but if you go to a place like Baxter State Park or northern Maine, you don't really see as many ticks right now, fortunately. And that's pretty cool to be able to sit on the grass in northern Maine and not worry about it. There are ticks in every single county, but there's far fewer in some areas. And as far as other protective things, I'm trying to think. Really, I mean, that about covers it. But I mean, definitely put permethrin on your boots, because they're usually coming from the bottom up. Don't roll around on the ground. The thing is, I roll around on the ground, so I don't, not roll around, but I do get down and take photos of, you know, wildflowers and things. So sometimes you just can't help it. But yeah, I've definitely heard a lot of anecdotal positive things about treating your clothing with permethrin, and it being super effective. So yeah.
We have
Any
a
other
question.
question?
We have a few more. Somebody has asked, what are some good trails for kids?
Let's see. Well, when I was writing my kid-friendly hikes in Maine book, or family-friendly hikes in Maine book, I tried to go with trails that were really well maintained and that had some educational aspect to it and weren't too long. Because there's nothing worse than getting out on a trail like a mile and then having your kid be like, I don't want to hike anymore. And it happens really quickly, unfortunately. I have written a whole column about activities you can do on the trail that can kind of engage your kid in once they get in the mindset that they don't want to be hiking anymore, at least get them back to the car. But and I also really love, yeah, hikes that have educational signs. So you don't have to do a lot of, you don't have to be an expert naturalist to teach them about things, because there's signs along the way that tell you about things. But yeah, I mean, like something like Beach Hill is a wonderful hike for kids because it's a wide path, it's well maintained. There are educational signs along the way. It's not too long. The way back is downhill. But it would, yeah, as far as getting like an actual list of trails, it's kind of tough. I would definitely go for easy hikes and work your way up, and try not to get in over your head too much. But yeah, I go hiking with my niece and she can take on more than I think she can usually. But it depends. It depends on the day too, which, you know, what are you gonna do? But what's another question?
Yes, so somebody wants to know, what are your favorite waterfalls in the state, and also favorite hikes throughout the state? And then another person has also asked, what is your favorite hike in Maine?
Okay. Waterfalls, I haven't done all the waterfalls, I'll tell you that. There's a lot of them. As far as hikes too, I really love Gulf Haggis. And I know a lot of people know about that. Gulf Haggis out in Kppen Ironworks. Absolutely beautiful. Also underestimated hike. People think because it's a waterfall hike, it might be easy, but it's round trip. You don't have to do the whole thing, but round trip, it's like 9 miles and it's a lot of up and down and it's really rocky. and you have to cross a stream. So it's definitely a big trip, a big adventure. If you do it, go early in the morning. It's also getting to be popular, so keep that in mind. But Gulf Haggis has multiple waterfalls along the way. And my favorite one of those waterfalls is Buttermilk Falls. I couldn't tell you why, I just think it's pretty. I also really like the Big and Little Niagara Falls in Baxter State Park. That's a cool hike and not too difficult. And you can actually do it 2 different ways. And one way includes paddling, which is kind of cool. And I did that as a call. I have a 1-minute hike paddle for that if you want to do that. But there's a ton of waterfalls in Maine. There's really a lot. And as far as my favorite hike ever, I usually go with, it's so hard, but I usually go with Mount Abraham, which is out near like Kingfield, and it's on the Appalachian Trail, but you get to the top with a fire wardens trail, which is like pretty straight up, because the fire wardens, I don't know if you know this whole history, but the fire wardens that used to be on these mountains, they would look for forest fires, and they were stationed up at the top of these big towers. And a lot of the towers are coming down now. There's only a few left. But Mount Abraham used to be one of those mountains where they would station themselves up there, and they would have a cabin like halfway down the mountain. So every day they'd have to like go from their cabin up to the top of the mountain and come back down. And they were in such good shape that they just made these trails like straight up the steepest part of the mountain so they could get there as fast as possible. So if you ever like, there's fire warden trails all over the state, and usually sometimes they'll keep the name Fire Warden Trail, and that's what that's from. And sometimes the cabins are left over, but those are kind of falling into disrepair now. I think there was one on Mount Abraham, and I don't think it's there anymore. I could be wrong, but yeah. And yeah, that was my favorite hike. I don't really know. There's a combination. It's got a really cool rock slide at the very end of it that you just climb through rocks forever. It kind of reminds me of Katahdin in how amazing it is. It's a really challenging hike. It's high up there. And there's a bunch of blueberries near the top. So I remember sitting and eating wild blueberries for an excuse to stop, I guess. And I hiked it with my mom one of the times, and that was really special just to get to the top with her. So sometimes it's who you're with, right? So so I always say that's my favorite, but I have so many. I love the north end of Baxter State Park too. Nice and quiet, and not many people go up there, and some really cool mountains up there too.
Someone would like to know if you have had any bad experiences while hiking.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the hiking community, people who hike in large are like great people, I think. Maybe I'm biased. I think they're really cool and chill and in general, but I've had a couple, I hike by myself. So my mom is always worried a little bit about other people. And it's actually funny. One of the times I went hiking with her, and it was at Mount Pisgah. It was a super well-known trail, a lot of people on the trail. And we had a guy kind of follow us, and he was going down the trail and then came back up and decided to follow us up the observation tower and kind of bother us. And of course that made her think that maybe this always happens to me. And it doesn't happen very often. I do have a dog with me, Oreo, and he is part pit bull, if not all pit bull. So he definitely deters people. And I think, other bad situations have been sometimes with off-leash dogs. I keep Oreo on leash, and he doesn't like other dogs. So it's a real big problem when I'm on a trail where dogs are supposed to be on leash and they're off leash and they're not listening to their owners. So I have to pick up my 50-pound dog and stand there and wait for the owner to come get their dog. And that's happened multiple times. But I don't want my dog to get in a fight with other dogs. So I'll just stand there with my dog. So I think that's the only time I've been in absolute terror is just me not wanting my dog to fight other dogs. But aside from that, usually regardless of that, every single time I go out and travel and go to a trail, I'm never wish I hadn't gone. I'm always happy that I went, and there's always a good experience with it. And I always experience something new. Like yesterday I was driving to the preserve, and I knew the preserve. I knew what it looked like kind of and stuff, but I, had in my head, hey, I wonder what I'm going to see today, because it's always going to be different. It turns out yesterday what I saw was a lot of wildflowers. I got to see my first lady slippers of the year. You know, so, and I got to see a lot of warblers and cool birds, but it's like a toss up. You never know what you're going to see. I remember I was back in that area a couple of weeks ago, and the highlight of my hike was seeing shrews, which I'd never seen before, like running all around on the moss and stuff. So you just never know. But I always tend to enjoy my hikes, even if there's a downside, like mosquitoes or something like that.
We have one more question, Aislinn.
Okay.
Do you have any YouTube videos of your hiking experiences?
Yeah, so the cool thing, so throughout the years, like for the past 7 or 8 years, I've created a video for every single hike, but they've all gone on the Bangor Daily News website through like their system. And we are in the process right now of switching all of our videos over onto YouTube to make it more accessible to people who watch YouTube, which I think is awesome because I'm a huge YouTube watcher. I have all sorts of, subscribe to all these different people, and I really enjoy YouTube. So I'm excited that I'm going to be on there. And actually, we've already started moving things over. So if you check out the Bangor Daily News YouTube channel, you'll see a bunch of, I think pretty much they started from the beginning. So they're taking some of my old stuff and putting it on there, and then they're getting up to the newer stuff. But yeah, I'm excited. And so they actually have a playlist of, they call it 1 minute hikes, because when my column started, I called it 1 minute hikes because the videos were 1 minute long. But that didn't last very long because now they're like 3, 4, 5 minutes long each. And so now it doesn't make sense. But the playlist is called 1 minute hikes or 1 minute adventures maybe now. And it's all going to be on YouTube shortly. And actually, when they officially, I guess, launch, I don't know what they're doing in the back end. They're doing all sorts of technical stuff. I'll be uploading directly onto YouTube in the future so that every time a hike or adventure goes up, it goes right onto YouTube. You want to say something, Lori? Yeah, so I'm excited to get that on there because I am a YouTube watcher.
Wonderful. We have a couple of people sharing thanks. Thank you for your experience and tips with us. And somebody else saying this was great. They had missed an earlier talk at another library, so glad that they were able to make it today. So those comments are coming through as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. And it's been a lot of fun. And I appreciate you coming. I'm like thrilled that so many people showed up, and it's been great. It's different to do it on Zoom, but I hope that my excitement came across.
I think I have one more, possibly one more question. Let's just take a look here. We have one more question. Bernie, did you have a question or just giving a thanks? Go ahead.
Yes, no, I'm good. Hi, Aislinn.
Okay. All right.
Hey, Bernie.
So I think we covered everything. More thank yous coming in, and I would like to extend a huge thank you on behalf of Rockland Public Library to you, Aislinn, for sharing your expertise with us. It's great to have such talent and expertise as we try to provide virtual programming. So a huge thanks from Rockland Library. We were so honored to host you.
Thank you so much.
And with that, we will say goodnight. We hope you join us in 2 weeks for Tom Atwell's gardening talk. And you can email me at sbillings@rocklandmaine.gov to get the link for that one. Thank you all. Have a wonderful night and take good care.